It's Waxing Lyrical, baby.
Hello, Waxers, and welcome to Waxing Lyrical with Mainz and Dutts. I'm your host, Mainz, and my colleague in a danger zone in Rainford, Mr. Neil Dutton. How are we, Neil?
Very well. And an update from where I was speaking yesterday, or the last pod, whenever you heard it. I have shaved.
Yeah,
and
which
still I
literally
itch.
was yesterday.
And still I itch.
Well, that's probably just the plague then. Nothing to worry about. Put a bit of cream on it and you'll be fine, right?
Yeah, rub a bit of dirt on it, I'll be right.
Yeah, we are double dipping this week as we missed last week. So this is actually this week's pod, and yesterday's pod was last week's pod, if that makes sense. We are deep diving into a division with the Super Bowl champs and pish that is the NFC South. Don't be worrying about who's winning this division. It won't be a surprise.
It really won't.
We're also, I was going to say, you're just shaking your head there, it's not a video.
Should be.
Well, yeah.
That's your fault.
It's probably my fault. What we're also looking at is draft strategies. We're going to look at standard drafts, and I'm going to pick a fight. And we'll go from there. Neil, I guess pre-season started last night. Takeaways were I like Chase Young, and that's it.
Yeah, my takeaways were the Eagles are still going to target their tight end. The Joe Flacco versus Nick Mullins for backup quarterback fight is not a fight. Nick Mullins was abysmal and completed as many. In fact, he completed more passes to the Steelers than he did to the Eagles. Quez Watkins be quick, and the Eagles' third stringers are not going to win any games this year, but they don't play thirds in the league. So,
luckily, I just want to make everyone aware, like what Neil's talking about with Nick Mullins and how bad he was. What you should put into context is when he was coached by Kyle Shanahan, he was a competent quarterback who progressed the ball down the field multiple times. So that either says a lot about Kyle Shanahan or not a lot about the Eagles coaching staff. I'll let you decide.
I mean, to be fair to friend Mullins, he was being blocked by people who will be bouncers in nightclubs in 3 weeks, and he was throwing to people who will be working in insurance in the same amount of time. But you still threw it to people wearing the different coloured uniform, mate.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I haven't watched the Washington New England game. Finding out that your kicker missed 2 field goals in pre-season is fun. Look forward to that continuing throughout the season. But let's not do that now, Neil, because it'd just be silly. And let's get on with the show and let's talk draft strategies and, most importantly, standard drafts. I have one question. We're going to use standards and say that PPR is standard, and I'm going to ask you, why is PPR rubbish?
PPR is not rubbish.
PPR is rubbish.
Children play standard leagues. PPR.
Think what you're doing there. I'm going to go first here. I am not suggesting for one moment that the right way to do this is standard league without some form of point. However, I do believe the idea that I could throw it backwards 5 yards and someone catches it and they get a point is complete and utter insanity. What we should be doing in this concept is the point of the game should be that when someone does something good, we give them like a tick in the box. Like J.C. McKissick should not be a valuable NFL player that people pick in drafts because he's targeted 100 times. It's not what should happen. There should be points per first down. I don't know why it isn't. And the fact that someone catching a ball 2 yards gets 1.2 points is complete and utter lunacy.
I don't disagree with that. Unfortunately, that's not what we have. PPR is a good way of making as many players fantasy relevant as possible. Now, if we were just playing standard, then yeah, JD McKissick has very little value. But with PPR, with you can when you have teams that more and more teams nowadays employ specialist pass catching backs in a league that's passing more than ever. There's a bigger pool of players for you to pick from. I mean, we go back 10 years, and the Chargers are a prime example of this. They had Ryan Matthews was the starter, and his backup was Danny Woodhead. But Danny Woodhead wasn't his backup. He was the third down back.
Yeah.
He was getting he was getting the receiving work. He was getting runs on third down. So it almost like in some leagues that year, Danny Woodhead was more valuable than his starter, as it were. Mm-hmm. And that's, for me, that was the first real eye opener in the. Do you know, running back isn't about, for a lot of teams, it's not about starter, backup anymore. It is situational. Therefore, in fantasy, we should be able to take advantage of this situational nature. Now, if you decide, well, Darrington Evans, he could have standalone value, and the Titans behind Derrick Henry, you're a moron, because that's not how it flies. They do not want to pass to the running backs. It's not just they don't pass to Derrick Henry, they don't really pass to the running back at all. But when you have teams where there is a distinct split between you're the runner, but when we need to pass, we're going to go to someone else, that other person can be fantasy relevant even if we hate it. And let's be honest, there's an awful lot in life that we should hate about ourselves anyway. PPR is just another one, but it's not the one that's going to finally lead me to go, do you know what, that is actually it.
The main thing we discuss about in standard drafts is the value of a running back. And I guess the question is it the idea of you either get an elite one or you just pick up any old mucker off the waiver wire?
Well, the thing that you'll notice, and this is more pertinent with running back than anything, is if you're a starting running back in the NFL or a lead back, you're going to get the most of the carries, you are fantasy viable because you will see the volume. Doesn't work that way with wide receiver. If as we saw last year, Michael Thomas goes down, they don't just plug in Johnny Catch-a-Ball and all of a sudden he's catching 10 passes a week. The whole offense changes. Yeah. When you have a running back, the prime example of this was Wayne Goldman last year for the Giants. Was he Saquon Barkley? No. But was he fantasy viable because he had a role? Yeah. He wasn't a superstar, but he was going to get the carries. He might get the odd catch. Wide receiver will just shuffle the deck.
Why, if in a league that is totally dominated by quarterbacks, why are quarterbacks not more important in fantasy?
Because, for the most part, most leagues, you only have to start one of them. So there's no point. The difference between the leading quarterbacks, this has been the pervading argument for a long time. The difference between the leading quarterback and maybe the 10 or 12th best fantasy scoring quarterback is about 3 or 4 points per game. The difference between the running back 1 and the running back 12 can be as high as 10 to 15 points per game. That's a bigger difference. Therefore, you don't need to run out to get a quarterback to get a positional advantage that's going to be, 40 yards passing or one good bit of running per week, as opposed to someone who he's going to get all the carries, he's going to get all the goal line work, he's going to get all the receptions, to someone, he gets most of the carries. If Superflex,
I was going to say, does this mean that we should be all, if we like the concept that we believe that quarterbacks should be more important, should we be drifting more towards Superflex fantasy? And can you explain what Superflex fantasy is, Neil?
Well, Superflex is essentially, it's just another flex spot, but in this one you can, instead of just starting another running back, wide receiver or tight end, you can also start another quarterback. So it's a flex spot, but it's a super flex spot because you can pick a quarterback. No, you don't have to pick quarterbacks in Superflex, of course. It's another flex spot. You can do what you want with it. But quarterbacks score the most fantasy points on a weekly basis, so logically you'd want another quarterback there. If we think quarterback is the most important position in American football, and it is, then fantasy football needs to reflect that in a way that makes quarterbacks more important and not people that you get to the 6th round of your draft before you begrudgingly decide, better start thinking about one. So Superflex makes it a little bit more important to get an elite quarterback and then get someone else who can chip in a bit later in the draft. Quarterback, Superflex is the preferred method of scoring for a lot of smart people that we've spoken to over the years. And I do know that there are some services now where their default setting is Superflex. NFL.com, Yahoo, places like that, they're not there yet. But as it grows in more and more importance, that will become the standard soon. And
but
eventually...
that is kind of really... Because, and this is not to be rude to NFL and Yahoo, far from it, it's a positive, that they are catering to a much wider audience and a much safer, conservative with a small c audience in that kind of situation. That they want the easiest way to play fantasy footy. Not many people want some kind of super flex tight end 1.5, PPR thing, which some of the more elaborate websites that we use for certain fancy things will do. So it doesn't surprise me. I mean, it took long enough for NFL.com to drift into PPR, for goodness sake. Do you know what I mean? So it's not surprising that they haven't bit with Superflex yet.
Absolutely. But as more and more people start to play it, eventually it will be the standard.
Absolutely.
That is one thing, we talk about, various changes that we can see coming in sport. I can see by the time Patrick Mahomes' contract is done, standard NFL fantasy leagues will all be Superflex. If you play one quarterback, you'll be looked on with the same disdain that people who play standard scoring are looked at now. And I am looking at you.
No, I don't play that, Neil. Apart from in the league.
But you want to.
I don't want to play. No, I don't want to play standard. I just disagree with PPR as a concept. I believe it should be points per first down.
Down with this sort of thing.
But there we go. Let's move on and let's get on with the NFC South preview. Before we start, let's look at who they're going to play this year. They're going to play the NFC East, the AFC East, one AFC South team, one NFC West team, and one NFC North team. As always, we will do a big question, a fancy darling, and more likely to be discussed. And eventually we will tell you who's going to, win the division, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. First team off the list, Neil, the Atlanta Falcons. Question is, new coach, but is this a rebuild or a reload?
Well, I'm glad you asked me, because they don't know.
No, they don't.
If they were reloading, then what they did in the draft was acceptable, but they shouldn't have traded away Julio Jones. If they're rebuilding, why the hell didn't they take a quarterback? They don't know. They got enamoured with the player. And then the decisions they've made since then have all been a bit, what? What are you doing? Your defence is terrible. Your line is not very good. Your quarterback is very good and has been for a long time, but he's getting old. So what have you done? You've tied yourself to him for a number of years to come, theoretically going into a time when you should be starting to think about the next quarterback. You've drafted a tight end higher than any team in NFL history has ever done. Yeah, he might be a freak. He could well have the greatest tight end season of all time. Who gives a shit? You're going nowhere. Now, the offense should be a little bit more diverse than it was under Dirk. I'm going to throw, be damned to everything else, Cotter. But we saw, to expect Arthur Smith to come in and run the same offense he ran in Tennessee when his lead running back is Mike Davis, smacks a little bit of optimism that I really don't think the Falcons deserve. So I don't know. This is a team that I don't know what they're expecting. I don't know what they're looking at. I don't know what the goal is. Do they want to compete this year? Do they want a soft tank, as Evan Silver calls it, to maybe start reloading on talent? I don't know, because NFL teams are honest to us twice a year, free agency and the draft. Well, you've been honest to us, but all you've done is confuse us.
Yeah, correct. Do you know a question, Neil? Matt Ryan signed his new contract, I believe, in 2018. Do you know how often it's been restructured since that point?
3 times?
4 times.
4 times in 3 years. Brilliant.
Which shows really what the Atlanta Falcons are a prime example of what happens to teams when you go all in and you don't win. We'll get on to one a bit later on who are even a worse situation than the Atlanta Falcons. But it's then tough to tell everybody that you're not going to do that anymore. That's difficult to say to everyone. Sorry, it didn't work out, and we didn't win the Super Bowl, even though we were 28-3 up. You've got a lot of expensive talent, and the problem is they've still got a lot of expensive talent, but they've got a lot of expensive talent that cause major problems on the cap, and then a load of what only can describe as scrubs on the other side of the pitch, right? The defence is not great. They got Dean Pease out of retirement because he loves, experimentation and playing with guys who he's never heard of. He's going to love it here because, with the exception of Fowler and Jarrett, it's a load of no-names that no one's ever discussed. Could the offense be fun? Yeah. I love Calvin Ridley. Love being right on Calvin Ridley. I hope I'm right on Kyle Pitts because I hope he's elite because those type of players are fun, right? I like Matt Ryan more than most, and I like Mike Davis, or as he's known on the Ringer fantasy program, Funk Davis, because Mike Davis isn't a cool enough name, so no one will draft him. So you have to give him like a cool name instead. But they might score a load of points. They're going to concede a load of points. I think last year they were, one of the unluckiest teams, and what I mean by that is there was actually stats that in other seasons they would have won 7-8 games. I think they won 4 or 5. They're a middling team at best, probably fun with probably a load of fantasy value in their team. Are they going anywhere? No. Is this a problem? Well, yeah. And until they do something about Matt Ryan, I don't really know what they can do, because in theory they need to deal with Matt Ryan while paying Calvin Ridley. I don't know how they do that.
If the goal when you have a top 5 pick is, we don't want to pick this high again, and you have a 37-year-old quarterback and you take a tight end, what are you doing?
I don't know.
I hate to break it to teams. Franchise quarterbacks do not become free agents. Franchise quarterbacks generally are not drafted from 15 onwards in the draft. You have to take them early. If you think there are franchise quarterbacks there, now I don't think we've got to the Denver Broncos yet, obviously, because when we get to the West, because that bullshit is not going to fly, and I don't care what anyone says. You thought a tight end was more important when your quarterback has got 2 to 3 years left. That's going to haunt you. That's all I'm going to say. Also, as well, you said about Mike Davis. He's actually apparently a house guest of Denny Carter and his wife. I think because on an episode of Living the Stream, Denny used the phrase, "You could live with Mike Davis." So then it went to that he does live with Mike Davis.
Mike Davis. That's a trip. That's a trip from Maryland to Georgia, though. Just saying. I know it's a straight line from down the East Coast, but it's a hell of a journey. Moving on, Neil. Who's the fantasy darling on the Atlanta Falcons? A lot to choose from.
There is a lot to choose from. Obviously, the players that you want, you're going to have to pay for them. You're going to have to take Calvin Ridley in the first round. You're probably going to have to take Kyle Pitts in the 3rd or 4th round. And spoiler alert, I won't. But I think if you want any value in this team, it's someone who, as we stand, it's not projected to be a starter, and it's Quadre Ollison. He's the second running back behind Mike Davis. The problem for Mike Davis is, yeah, he was productive last year. Yeah, he had splashes when he was with Chicago and whatnot, but he is just a guy. And when you're just a guy, and the fella behind you isn't that far off from the player you are, and is younger than you, your job is under threat. If Ollison gets, some goal line carries, or Mike Davis gets dinged up, then Davis probably isn't getting the job back. Does that mean Quadre Ollison is a player you absolutely cannot leave your draft without? Of course it doesn't. But he's someone to look at in the waiver wires as we get closer to the season, because I think there's a good chance he's going to have weeks, as we discussed earlier, where he'll be fantasy relevant, probably because Mike Davis will be on the sideline.
I think you just want him to be good because he's got a well better name than Mike Davis.
Well, have you ever met a Quadre?
No, I wish I had, though.
Yeah.
That's an epic name.
We've met Smiggers, Maccas, Daves, Joneses.
Yeah, but they're not their real names. Like, Quadre's
exactly.
His real name. Like, that's on his birth certificate. If they have them. I don't know.
Wow.
No, like in America. I don't know. Do they have birth certificates?
They do.
Okay, whatever. I just assume they just don't and then have a driver's license. The over-under is 7. Are the Atlanta Falcons more likely to be discussed by draftniks in Week 18 in the Super Bowl or not at all?
The worst thing about it is I think it's not at all, because I think they will be competitive. They will score enough points that they will win enough games to take them out of contention for the quarterback they probably should have taken this year, and they'll just loll. They'll be nothing. They'll be the classic vanilla franchise in 2021.
They have 2 quote-unquote primetime games. One is in London, an NFL game against the New York Football Jets.
Oh, God.
Good. Enjoy it, London. Enjoy. And they also play the New England Patriots on Thursday Night Football. Oh, God. Can't wait for all those history lessons again. That's going to be so cool.
Is that in Atlanta or is it in New England?
It's in Atlanta.
If Cam Newton's the starter that week, he will go off, as he always does against the Panthers.
He does.
The Falcons. I believe he's from Atlanta, isn't he?
Yeah, I think so.
Georgia, anyway.
He won't be playing.
No.
I'm with you. I think they are. I mean, the schedule fact that they're permanently playing at 6:00 UK time suggests that they are not at all. I think the cap hit to lose Matt Ryan next year is something outrageous. So I don't even think they could get rid of him next year anyway. So, I expect him to still be there, and that kind of quarterback purgatory will have to wait for another year. 7's probably a good number, 7 and 10, something like that. But it could be 7 and 10, and let's be honest, second in this division.
Let me just have a quick look about that. The cap for next year. Matt Ryan's cap number next year is 48.62 million. Dead money, if they cut him, would be 40.5 million. And they would save 8. 2023, his cap number would be 43 million. It would be 15 million in dead money, but they could save 28 million. So the earliest he's going off the roster is 2023.
That's what I'm saying. He's not gone next year, so I don't think they draft a quarterback unless you're doing the Alex Smith, Patrick Mahomes thing. But whatever,
because it works every time.
No, exactly right. It's worked once. Carolina Panthers, big question. Can Joe Brady fix Sam Darnold? It's the only question for the Carolina Panthers, really, because I'll give you some numbers. Based on DVOA, which we've used bits and pieces, Footballers Outsiders kind of metrics, it be up to the 40. On offense, the Panthers were number 2 in DVOA. In the red zone, they were 31st. So they could move the ball 60 yards with consummate ease, and then got to the 20 and were absolutely toilet. So they needed to be better. Can Joe Brady make Sam Darnold better?
No, because Sam Darnold is not very good. Now, let me paint you a picture. Sam Darnold is a placeholder. Is he an upgrade on Teddy Bridgewater? Yeah.
Is he?
I think he's a little bit more aggressive than Teddy, but that's hardly surprising, as I've seen sloths that were more aggressive than Teddy Bridgewater when it came to throwing the ball. Sam Darnold
Teddy Bridgewater's about aggressive as you go in the bar.
Basically, yeah. Not going to happen. Let it come to you, Teddy.
Exactly, yeah.
Is he an upgrade on Bridgewater? Yeah, he probably is, because we saw that Bridgewater, for his failings, could still prop up fantasy-relevant people. He had, 3 people went over 1,000 yards from scrimmage last year for the Panthers. Can Darnold carry that on and maybe up it a bit? He's got the inbuilt chemistry with Robbie Anderson. Yeah, he probably can. But they don't need to pay him again after this year. So what they want to do is they want to invest on the defense, which they have done. They want the defense to improve. They've still got some nice pieces on offense before, maybe in a year's time, when the situation looks completely different and maybe we have a bit more clarity, the Panthers trade for Deshaun Watson. They don't need Sam Darnold to be a superstar because he's not the long-term answer. They just need him to keep them afloat so that they can say, in a year's time, we are competitive enough, we'll give up enough, let's go.
Besides,
besides, Joe Brady's going to be coaching the Bengals this time next year anyway. So
this is the thing that Joe Brady doesn't need to fix Sam Darnold, but it would help if he made him competent plus. Because he makes him competent plus. This is his last year in Carolina, right? Because as you quite rightly point out, he won't get the Bengals job because they'll do something stupid, but he'll get a job. Like, I understand why, for those who are unaware, why Neil said he'll get the Bengals job is because he was the offensive coordinator for Joe Burrow when he won the Heisman, and obviously he wasn't with Jamar Chase. He was with Jamar Chase. He was with Jamar Chase. Sorry, Burrow's been in the league 2 years, not one. So it makes sense, right? I think this team is weird, right? Because I watched them play, and as I said, when you watch them, they move the ball quite easily and then never scored. They were, okay, I guess. Can they be better? Second year head coach, some decent skill players, whatever. Yeah, I'm not convinced though. And I'm not convinced by Sam Darnold. This should be year 4 for him, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't get better in year 4. That's not a thing, really. We're looking at, Ryan Tannehill, and that's the list.
Pretty much.
And, okay, there is a clanging alarm going off in my head that there's a link between Sam Darnold and Ryan Tannehill. Don't get me wrong. But, I mean, it's folly to say that we're going to go that way.
Tannehill had good seasons before Gase got hold of him.
Correct.
Not great, not like he's been the last 2 years, but Tannehill had shown us something. Darnold has shown us absolutely nothing. You look at all the advanced metrics last year, in the same offense, with the same play caller, Joe Flacco was better than Sam Darnold.
Exactly right. It's not pretty. So that is some fix that they would have to put in place. I'm not sure they can.
No.
Fancy darling on the Carolina Panthers, Neil?
The fancy darling, if we continue the Joe Brady theme, would be Terrace Marshall. Now, obviously, they have DJ Moore, they have Robbie Anderson. I expect them to, you're going to get DJ Moore in the 5th or 6th round. You can get Anderson a bit later. Christian McCaffrey's probably going off the board the first player you pick. Terrace Marshall in that 3rd spot. The Panthers are one of those teams that almost go out of their way to make me angry with them, in the sense that they don't give a crap about their tight end. Ian Thomas, I'm sorry, my friend, I've wasted too many tears on you. I'm not buying it again. So they just decide, do you know what, we're not going to use the tight end. We'll go with the 3 wide receivers. Terrace Marshall's going to line up in the slot. He's going to be a red zone presence. Hopefully he can help them between the 20s, where, as you said last year, they were abysmal. Where he's going in the draft, do I like his ADP more than I like DJ Moore's? I don't know. I like DJ Moore, but I always think, can you give us a bit more?
Yeah,
a few more yards, maybe another touchdown.
Don't tell me about it, Neil. I think based on last year when we were bigging him up, I think I drafted him in about 3 leagues, and he was nearly good enough to be excellent and not quite good enough to be dropped every single week.
Yeah. He was, the sword of Damocles is somewhere above his head, and that's the way he likes it.
Correct. Over under is 7.5 for the Carolina Panthers, so slightly ahead of the Atlanta Falcons. Where do you see him being nailed by draftniks in week 18 in the Super Bowl, or not at all?
And I think, again, they're like the Falcons. This is a very vanilla team. Defensively, I expect them to be better than they were last year. Offensively, I think they can make a few more strides, especially if McCaffrey is healthy for the bulk of the season. But I don't see them contending, and I don't see them sucking, which is why their best chance of getting a quarterback is, and we've seen that David Tepper is prepared to go all in. I mean, he did when he got Matt Rule. If he identifies that Deshaun Watson is a way to make this team relevant, and there are no obstacles, or the obstacles that are there have been somewhat cleared, he will swing for the fences, and he will go after Deshaun Watson, which is good because I don't really want him in an Eagles uniform. So they're not going to get a stud quarterback in the draft. They'll have to do it that way. They're just a middle-of-the-road team at the moment, which, bear in mind that a couple of years ago they were despicably bad.
Yeah.
It's not too bad.
Yeah, I think they're probably more wins than last year. They're a middle team. As we mentioned yesterday or on our last show, they've got what we can describe as the Jacksonville Jaguars spot, which is a Thursday night football game against the Houston Texans, which would be an horrific game and may get 4 fans in the UK watching. Yeah, I think they're a not at all team, and as you quite rightly said, that middlingness means you're swinging for fences in the. I guess you said Watson. I'm going to go Rodgers. Although I think people seem to suggest that's a Denver destination, but anyway, they're going to have to do something at quarterback, I would assume. But I do think that Darnold will, at least get Joe Brady a job somewhere. Next team, Neil, New Orleans Saints. There's one thing that I'm going to tell you now, just to kind of brace yourself for. The over-under for the New Orleans Saints, and I double-checked this, is 9.5. But my question on the New Orleans Saints is it over in New Orleans?
Oh, yes. The bill comes due for all of us eventually. 9.5, I'm sorry, that's a legacy line.
It's insane. And we joke a lot that the cap isn't real, but eventually it becomes real. At some point, there are years where it cannot be real, right? So the Rams have consistently made it not real. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers this year are highlighting that it's not real.
Howie.
Yeah, Howie. But the New Orleans Saints have played all of their get-out-of-jail-free cards, and they are in, purgatory. Yeah.
I say they've maxed out the credit card as much as they can. Now it's no, we actually want money now.
Yeah, correct.
It's the cap. It can be somewhat illusionary as long as you've got a quarterback whose contract you can keep restructuring and kicking and kicking and kicking. But then eventually that quarterback says, "Okay, thanks a lot, I'm out of here." Okay, well now we have to pay you not to play for us, and we're going to have to pay you an awful lot of money not to play for us next year as well. Then they have a situation that there's an excellent article by Larry Holder on The Athletic about New Orleans' messy history when it comes to divorcing themselves from high-profile players. There's more than you think. A lot of their better players over the last 15 years don't tend to leave on good terms. They listed players like Darren Sproles, Reggie Bush, Jimmy Graham, Brandon Cooks. These are all people who were ridiculously productive but fell out with the team, and then they just got messy and they want him off the roster. This is Michael Thomas. This is where he's going. Now, apparently he and Sean Payton had a productive discussion this week. And as I point out on Twitter, every time I've had a productive discussion with my boss, it usually ends with me exploring opportunities elsewhere.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think they'd love to trade Thomas now, be rid of the headache, but it's cap prohibitive. So literally,
it's also for a team, you don't get him until week 7 because he was told by the Saints to have surgery. He went and got his own second opinion, which suggested that he shouldn't get surgery and he should rest it and rehab it. He didn't tell the Saints that he'd done that, and then when he realised that rehab wasn't working, then did the surgery 5 months later.
Do you think his second opinion said to him, by the way, don't tell your employees about this, don't keep them in the loop?
Unless his second opinion was Dr. Nick from The Simpsons, I'm not sure.
We can never rule that out.
We can't.
This team has a problem on offense because we talked. It seemed like a joke at the time that they only had Michael Thomas and Alvin Kamara. Well, now they've only got Alvin Kamara. Miss me out with how good Marcus Callaway has been. Yes, I know Adam Troutman is likely to be a breakout tight end because he is a super talented player. So what? Your quarterback is either Jameis Winston, who, lest we forget, the last time he was a regular season starter for an entire year, he threw 30 interceptions. Or Taysom Hill, who's a poor man's Cam Newton in his pomp without the throwing ability. They're your choices. Your defense is good, but it wasn't as great as it has been in past years. You've now, put this way, it used to be the Drew Brees show. This was the classic, is it Brees or is it Peyton? Well, now it needs to be Peyton. Because if it was Brees, you're in trouble.
We are about to find out how good Sean Payton is at his job, because Sean Payton has been seen as an offensive genius, and correct me if I'm wrong, has had Drew Brees as quarterback every single year he's been a head coach.
Yeah, Sean Payton was once removed from play calling when he was in New York by Jim Fossil. when he had the quarterbacking guru himself that was Kerry Collins. Don't forget that he had play calling taken off him when he had a mediocre quarterback to work with.
Go on, sorry.
Say for 15 years he's had Drew Brees. I could look a genius with Drew Brees,
and that's why when you've had the Michael Thomases who no one thought would do anything, or the Marquise Colstons in the past, who came from nowhere, people started saying, maybe Callaway could be the same. Yeah, but as you quite rightly pointed out, their quarterback is now Jameis Winston or Taysom Hill. And let's be honest, this has to be Jameis Winston's job. Now, I understand the interception thing, but, competent quarterback play, quote unquote, only comes from one of those two people. And if your best offensive player is Alvin Kamara, why would you stunt your best offensive player by playing Taysom Hill? That doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
See, I go the other way. I think that they basically have to become a multifaceted running team. So that means Taysom Hill starting, mixing in a bit of the quarterback run, using Alvin Kamara, working in Latavius Murray as well, and throwing when they have to.
Oh, okay. We disagree on this, which is interesting, because I think if you play Taysom Hill, you may as well draft Latavius Murray in the third round of every single draft, and Alvin Kamara may as well be putting him in. I think you've got to take Winston. You've got to give the option of throwing downfield. I understand that also means you will throw multiple interceptions.
I would just wonder that Sean Payton would feel he could control the offense more with Taysom Hill.
That is probably true.
Relying on Jameis Winston, not missing the linebacker, dropping into coverage.
This is the Sean Payton, most head coaches, right? This is the ego debate, right?
Yeah.
Like, if Taysom Hill becomes a competent quarterback, Sean Payton's a genius, right? Like, and, people like that. Neil, we've talked about a lot, but who's the fancy darling on the New Orleans Saints?
Well, I quite like it, say, Latavius Murray, considering how late he's going, especially as I think he's going to have a weekly role, even with Alvin Kamara taking the bulk of the work. The plus side of that is we saw in the past that when Alvin Kamara doesn't play, Latavius Murray gets a workload bigger than the type Kamara gets by himself. They've shown us they don't want Alvin Kamara to be an 80% of the opportunities running back. They don't want him to do it. He's never had 1,000-yard rushing. By that man, he's had a shitload of receptions. He's had at least 80 in all years he's played, including 3 in a row with 81 before this year. This year he was on course to smash the running back reception record. Then Taysom Hill happened. But they've shown us you're not going to plough him 40 times a game. They don't want to give him 35 opportunities in a game. They're quite happy around 20, 22. So if they want to run the ball, they're going to mix in Taysom Hill and then give Latavius Murray some work as well. So again, when he's going in draft, it's very, very late. You're not going to start him with confidence as your running back one, but as a flex option, especially if you need it and the matchup is nice, let's board the L train.
The L train. As I've said, Neil, the over-under for the Saints is 9.5, which I think is insane. Are they more likely to be discussed by draftniks in Week 18 in the Super Bowl or not at all?
Absolutely not at all.
There's no way they can get close to 9. They can't win 10 games, surely. No. Who's taking the over here? Like 10-7? That's mental.
Yeah.
I'm just looking now. They play... First game is Green Bay in the Superdome, which could be a track meet that they haven't got the running shoes for. They play at Washington.
That's probably your best analogy of all time.
Thank you. At Seattle, at Tennessee. They played Tampa Bay twice. Do you know what I mean? Like Buffalo, the Patriots. It's not a fun schedule anyway. Like, I don't see this working. I not at all, yeah. And I wouldn't be surprised. I really wouldn't be surprised if this was the worst team in the division.
It's certainly the team with probably the highest expectation compared to where their actual talents are. The biggest gap between reality and expectation.
Correct. Okay. final team, the team of the division, the team of the NFL. Everybody's favourite quarterback and everybody's favourite team, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Big question, Neil. Barring injury, I don't want injury in it. What stops the Bucs being the NFC's representatives in the Super Bowl?
Natural disasters. If it worked so well last year, why wouldn't it work now?
It worked so well last year when they got a new quarterback in who was 75 years of age, who couldn't practice with any of his elite talent, and it took until possibly week 11 or 12 to be any good. This season, they've had a full off-season of standard work together. So this is going to be better on offense, not worse.
Yeah. The pieces they have, we saw, as I say, they only really started gelling when they found a perfect mesh between the Bruce Arians system and the Tom Brady system once they had their bye. And after the bye, their offense was damn near unstoppable. Their defense is fast, it's aggressive, and it takes the ball off you. Well, those type of things, they travel. I'm not saying you have to be stingy and shut down, but that doesn't travel. But if you keep hitting my quarterback, yeah, that can work. We're going to stop teams, especially when, say, with a head coach like Bruce Arians and a quarterback like Tom Brady, we're going to keep throwing on you because we want to score lots of points on you because it helps us that you have to keep up with us. This is, what was it? The 77, 78 Steelers, the last time the Super Bowl champions returned all starters. Yeah, that was in the pre-salary cap era as well.
Exactly right.
Yeah, this is a roster filled with players on both sides who want to play for the Buccaneers and Tom Brady because, and we spoke about this with Daggers a few years ago, when before they signed Brady, it was the culture is wrong. Brady came in, and my line was, even if they don't win anything with Brady, he puts in place the culture for when they are good. Well, it came straight away, and now the culture is there, and all these people want a piece of it. And why wouldn't they? Because show me a weakness. Yeah, they could have a better running back. Jesus, if that's your weakness in 2021, I think you're okay.
I think the thing is as well is this team is, as you said, brought everyone back and spent a lot of money to do so. Under the proviso that they have a quarterback and a roster now that they can win with. But they also understand that in 3 years they could be, the worst team in the league. But who cares? Because you could have won 2 or 3 Super Bowls. It's all well and good being a New England Patriots, but no other team is. So if you've got a chance to win, go and win. Don't mess it up. Don't cut corners, and then deal with the consequences later. And it looks like that's what they're going to do. And to be fair, it goes on them. I've got no problem with that whatsoever.
We do know that, I say, they obviously, people may have read a book or seen it in a paper since then. This is the reigning Super Bowl champs. When did they last win this division?
Oh, I don't know. I couldn't even tell you. A decade ago?
Go on.
I was going to say a decade, or 2011?
2007.
Oh my goodness.
In fact,
who the hell's the head coach in 2007?
Gruden.
Is Gruden still the coach then? He's on his 15th quarterback at that point, I assume.
Yeah, he had one more year in 2008. They went 9-7 and fired him. And since then, they've only finished twice second in the division. Twice. One of them was last year because obviously they got into the playoffs as a wildcard team.
Yeah, of course. Who's the fancy darling on the Tampa Bay Bucs, Neil?
Fancy darling, again, these are players that you're going to have to pay for if you want. If you want Mike Evans, you want Chris Godwin. Hint, you should probably get Godwin. You want Gronk, you want Tom Brady, you want Antonio Brown. These are all players you're going to have to get at cost. But someone who offers a little bit of fancy value very, very late in drafts, and it's a player they went out specifically to add to the team because he gave them an element that their existing players do not have, is Giovanni Bernard. He could be the Bucs' James White. Now, James White isn't a super sexy player, but he has had 50 receptions in each of his last 5 years, and 4 of those years were with Tom Brady. Brady is the king, people may have noticed, of taking what defenses give him. If defenses give him the check down, he'll hit the check down. Ronald Jones couldn't catch a cold. Leonard Fournette was a disaster in pass blocking. I wrote about this for 4for4 football. Which of these should you draft? And the answer probably should have been neither. They were both crap pass blockers last year. Giovanni Bernard is an excellent receiver. He's also excellent in pass protection. He will get that job and let Lombardi, Lenny, and Rojo scrap for the other work. So he's not going to. Can he get 50 or 60 receptions? Probably not. There's far too many high-profile players competing for that type of target. Could he get 30 to 40 and have weeks where he gets bust off a couple of touchdowns? Probably. Again, it's running back 3 late in the season desperation, but it's a player to look at because it's a cheap way of getting exposure to what should be a prolific offense.
Over-under is 11.5, which is 2 more than the Saints, and we think the Saints are garbage. In the Super Bowl, I assume?
Certainly in contention for it. I don't, as you say, failing injury and the division they have, I don't see how you can look at this team and not think they are primed to be the NFC representatives. There is another team I actually like more than them, but this is a team that actually, you have to look at and say, yeah, why couldn't they run it back? They've got a quarterback who knows what it takes to. No, we've won it once. We get up and go again.
I think Neil's doing a preview of his NFC West program there, are we?
You may think that. I couldn't possibly comment.
Well, I've listened to you talk about the NFC North and the NFC East, so yeah, I can. I think this is, 11.5 is because they're probably going to win all their games against their division. They play Dallas first game. Let's hope they spank them. They do have tough games, though. They got to play at the Rams week 3. Could be a big game, especially as I assume that's who Neil thinks is going to represent the Super. No, it's not. He's shaking his head. I'm going to shut up now. They play 5 primetime games, so Daggers will be staying up seriously late or not going on Twitter during the next morning. But there we go. These are the benefits you get of being the best team in the NFC, if not the NFL. Neil, I'm going Bucs, Falcons, Panthers, Saints.
Bucs, Panthers, Saints, Falcons.
And the other 3 are nowhere near getting a playoff berth, right?
No. It would need the Buccaneers something disastrous happen to them for even being contention in this division. So I certainly don't see them winning enough games to get into a wild card spot.
Exactly. Excellent, Neil.
Especially with the division we still haven't talked about.
Exactly right. Exactly. NFC South done, Neil. You mentioned yesterday where people can catch you, but it's only tomorrow, so please tell them again.
Still on Twitter at NDutton13. The division previews for Number Fire are coming fast and furious. AFC South was released on Friday. Still to come, I say, are the the West and the South for the NFC, and also I say my vote is a tight end for every round in your drafts. I will work on that on Sunday and hopefully get that released early next week.
I'm at Mainz7 combined. We're at waxing_lyrical. 2 pods in 2 days. These boys are tired, but this is how you get ready for the season, lifting those weights, getting yourself ready in training camp. Until next week, where we do, I guess, the other side of the Bucs situation, the AFC West with the Kansas City Chiefs. These top guys are out.